Hello, it is really early in the morning where I'm streaming from right now. So yeah, as you can tell from the title of the video, I will be doing a live read of X-Men Deadly Genesis. Okay, I need to just sort of shift over here. Okay, so X-Men Deadly Genesis is written by Ed Brubaker. Let me just start from the beginning. Eesh. So, X-Men Deadly Genesis, Ed Brubaker, pencils by Trevor Hairsine, inker Chris Justice, changes at least the first issue changes to the next one to Scott Hanna. The colorist is Val Staples. This story is kind of infamous for the retcons it brought in the X-Men line. Although, as someone who read it a lot later in life when it came out, the retcons don't seem that shocking. Basically, as some people would call it, it's the character assassination of Professor Xavier. Again, it's not really as shocking as you might think. So, Deadly Genesis also resolves a few mysteries, like a long-standing one in the X-Men fandom about who was the third Summers brother. We find that mystery out. We've played that out. I'm not sure if that really mattered as much, but okay, we decided to do it. So, let's jump in. We see Cyclops and Beast having a conversation where in the X-Mansion, apologies, sorry if you can hear that, where Sentinels are now hovering around them. Yeah, so this takes place right after House of M and the Decimation, where Wanda Maximoff said no more mutants and essentially just depopulated the mutant race. The government, taking advantage of this, now uses Sentinels to essentially protect the mutants by basically herding them into one location. Scott and Beast appear to be having a conversation about that, and except Beast is actually worried about something else. Namely, a lot of these mutants had very unique energy signatures. And then there were over 1 million mutants across the planet. And now only a handful of them have those powers that they once had. So essentially, where did all that energy go? Well, to find the answers to that, you have to check out a new Avengers story called The Collective, but we're not going into that. But there were a lot of other far-reaching effects, and Deadly Genesis is a direct consequence of House of M. As we see that the energy released by the Decimation event essentially seems to have caused a crash in outer space. We find that Mission Control is struggling to connect to Prospect. I'm assuming that's the team in outer space. We see that they're all dead. And we also see a rocky formation with a face in it. Not the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in an X-Men comic. But now that rocky formation seems to be waking up. What? No. It can't just be me. It can. And then the dude bursts out of the rock. He finds the dead scientists, and interestingly, he uses his powers to find out what happened to them. And we see that either this dude's awakening or the mutant energy itself somehow ended up destroying the shuttle and the people on it. He does not seem concerned. We don't exactly know. He explores the entire shuttle. I'm assuming, judging from one of the scientists here, this appears to be a sword shuttle. Sword was this intergalactic version of S.H.I.E.L.D., which essentially protected Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Namely, their function was to essentially be like S.H.I.E.L.D. and provide a few bodies until the actual heroes showed up. Sorry for being cavalier, but that's kind of what they were. The dude, in the meanwhile, seems to be very shocked to find out that it is the 21st century. No. How could they? No. No! No! Boom! Yeah, sorry. We then open on a picture of happier times with a version of the Claremont X-Men. Though I don't see Sunfire here, so I'm assuming he's the one holding the camera. Nightcrawler and Colossus are having a discussion over, like, what happened, how much has changed, and the conversation turns towards Professor Xavier, who has been missing since the House of M event. Colossus tries to assure Nightcrawler that, hey, the professor probably isn't dead. But Kurt's not exactly sure about that. They have a conversation about how they met the professor, how the professor saved his life. The book is really laying it on thick, just in case readers forgot how influential Professor Xavier was to these guys, so that the inevitable, yeah, we'll get to that anyway. So yeah, Emma Frost and Kitty Pryde are using Cerebra, the more upgraded version of Cerebro, to try to figure out if they can find the professor. Lockheed, the dragon, is also with Kitty during this time. The two are not very friendly with one another, but they're having a little look, I am mostly on Kitty's side here, but come on, man. Lockheed, you're not helping. Hey, it's your pheromones that get him all agitated, Emma, so stop exuding them. Kitty, no, Kitty, just don't. Anyway, this charming banter is interrupted when Emma is picking up something. I'm assuming it's the dude. Okay, yeah, it is that dude. Because we see an Omega level energy moving off the chart and seemingly crashes into somewhere and fries Cerebra something good. Whoa. Yeah. So Emma is unconscious, so they have no way of knowing exactly what happened. Beast is, of course, very concerned. Emma's tough though, Scott. I'm more worried about what could have done that to Cerebra. Yeah, so Scott decides to check out where this thing was about to crash, which was upstate New York, and takes Wolverine and Rachel Summers, who is the alternate daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey from the Days of Future Past timeline. Look, like I said, this is not really that shocking a retcon. The X-Men are walking retcon factories. Okay, so thinking that they found a new mutant, that to an Omega level 1, Scott decides to go investigate because he does not want the military getting their hands on them. Rachel asks if he thinks that it is the professor, but he's not exactly convinced. He also suggests that that's the reason why Rachel's going. If it's him, then Rachel would be able to pick up his thought patterns. If it isn't, he wants to know who else could be that powerful. So the X-Men are about to leave, but you may have remembered that there are Sentinels watching them right now. So they just leave, distract their Sentinel friends with a bunch of drones. Pretty nice. Wolverine's impressed. But anyway, they go to check out what it was. Kitty is recovering from the mind blasting Emma gave her and sees dead Colossus behind her. No, it's actually Colossus alive. But why did he see that? Residual effects from Emma's mind or something? Okay. Kurt, meanwhile, is going around in the forest and is apparently attacked by a hallucination? Vision? What do you want to call this? Anyway. So yeah, he's attacked by Wolverine, being the most astute one, looks at the wreckage and realizes, yeah, whatever that was, that is not Professor X, as we see a giant fist holding up the crashed space shuttle. And Rachel does pick up something, and they decide to go investigate. In the meanwhile, we have Sean Cassidy, aka the X-Men formerly known as Banshee, looking through Moira's files on the request of Beast. Of course, even as far away as Muir Island, we see Sean is sort of hampered by the same visions that Kitty and Nightcrawler are getting in the X-Mansion. So it's probably not just residual effects from Emma going unconscious and Cerebra exploding. Our trio of uncanny X-Men go to investigate and see what appears to be Jean Grey. Rachel acts like a complete amateur, which sadly is a trend that continues a lot in the 2000s, and just goes running after her. So it's up to Scott and Wolverine to be the senior ones and find out what got her. So yeah, it's our guy, and he even highlights it and says, I guess you two are the bright ones. They attack, and I'm presumably defeated. He does not find... We cut back to Sean, as we see Moira apparently leading him into a different room. What is this place? Hey, Charles Xavier's notes. Important. This is what she wanted me to see? Meanwhile, our Omega level mutant is just messing with the X-Men right now, taking out Rachel, Wolverine, Cyclops in very short order. Marvel Girl. Not any Marvel Girl I've ever heard of. Look. Ah, Scott. At least you haven't changed. Oh, you know my name. You don't remember me? Well, that's just so perfect. Looks like we got a use for the girl after all. Meanwhile, Sean is looking through the files which the ghost of Moira led him to, and he finds a video file which tells him what a total and utter bastard Charles Xavier really is. You on the ground, stay right where you are. Meanwhile, Wolverine has finally been captured by the Sentinels. You know, they go by official national emergency, or ONE, because Marvel loves its acronyms, and he's about to be arrested. Meanwhile, each of these comics has a backup story, and this one is about a girl named Petra who has the ability to manipulate the Earth. We're not really going to go into too much detail here. That's all that really matters. She's worried about being a mutant, and she knows that, well, she could be dead, considering that everything around hates her. We're just gonna skip past it. Abusive foster parents, runs a mutant, she runs away, she lives on the street, accidentally killed her family with her own powers, and then she had some experience. She does get some experience with her powers, and she uses them to create diamonds so that she could, you know, sort of survive. Unfortunately, the police managed to find her and capture her one day. Of course, her little backup story ends with someone coming to get her. Now she's really scared. She should be, considering what happens to her. But anyway, let's move into the second issue. We see the X-Men have come to get Wolverine, and yeah, just like, it's nice going back to these old comics and sometimes realizing that, yeah, that hatred and prejudice, which often seems like forced at times, it actually exists. The X-Men are constantly hindered by the people they're trying to protect. So, yeah, oh my god. I mean, look at this guy. So you and Bigfoot here can tell him what to say? I don't think so. Yeah, Anyway. Oh, God. He even brings up the Patriot Act. Can't possibly claiming that Wolverine is a terrorist. Alright, plan B. Yeah, plan B is getting... Well, I'm assuming Emma is involved, as all of a sudden the commander just decides, well, sorry for the misunderstanding, we're gonna release the prisoner now. Thankfully, Wolverine played nice and allowed them to even handcuff him, or else it could have been very bloody. Also, Emma is wearing pigtails throughout the story, which I find very off-putting. Ugh. Anyway, Emma is, of course, a very good telepath, and has managed to sort of play around the Sentinels, which are, well, yeah, they're not exactly flawless, because after all, these Sentinels are manned by men. So it was actually very easy for Emma to sort of get around that. Meanwhile, as the team wonder what happened to Scott and Rachel, we see Scott has been, well, they're held into walls, which seem to be formed by Petra's Petra's earth powers. So, and neither of them are able to access their powers properly. Anyway, Rachel also observes that Scott's not wearing his visor. I'm not sure why that's a shock. I'm assuming that's because his powers aren't also shut off. Anyway, back at the Xavier Institute, they're trying their best to locate where Scott and Rachel are. Meanwhile, Havoc is pissed that they're not finding his brother. Look, this just doesn't help. Look, I get that he is very tense, but acting out like this does not help anyone. So, essentially everyone else sort of sends Alex to sit at the kids' table. He also berates himself for it. And meanwhile, he also sees a vision of Lorna and Bobby. Bobby, you're so bad. You make me bad, Lorna Dane. Before I met you, I was the straightest arrow in this school. Okay, you know what? I'm skipping this. Besides, Iceman is gay now, so this just feels outdated. Anyway, as Havoc watches this weird past cheating thing, I can only... It's like... And, well, I'm assuming that doesn't put him in a better mood, as when Nightcrawler asks him if he's okay, he just tells him to leave him alone, and Kurt is also mad. Everybody is mad in this book. So, we cut back to Rachel and Scott. Rachel's powers seem to be working. It's like she can pick up the professor's thought patterns here. Like, he was here, but a long time ago. And then he used this place for something. And Scott is surprised because he's been with Xavier longer than any of us and has no idea where he is. Except our intrepid new Omega mutant, I'm not yet naming him, he manages to realize that Scott's memories have been wiped of him, and he seems to know who he is. We get the typical, "You're insane. I guess maybe I am. But I promise you one thing, I won't lie to you. Who are you? Why are my powers gone? Now who's insane? I didn't say I'd answer any questions. What's the point of all this? Punishment. You're here for yours and to witness someone else's. That's why the girl's here. That's why she's not dead like your friends with the claws." Scott actually picks up on this, realizing that he knows Scott, but doesn't know who Wolverine is. That's a very specific timeline about X-Men, so who is this guy? Meanwhile, Sean is making his way back to the United States with the information that he found from Moira. And for some reason, some inexplicable reason, he decides to take a flight and decides that I can only send this information by my hands. I cannot tell you this outright what to expect. Yes, even writers like Ed Brubaker realize need to try to up the ante by keeping us in suspense a bit. Anyway, our mysterious mutant manages to use the shuttle's communications to hack into the X-Men and... Oh, no, wait, I think this is the Blackbird. No, he's using the Blackbird to find out, to track their communications. That actually makes a lot more sense. So, yeah. He hears Sean give his flight details to Kurt, which means, yeah, something's about to go down. Yeah. Kurt notices that a lot of the people in the mansion are acting a bit on edge, and he's not exactly sure why. And when Sean called him, he also said something about seeing ghosts. Now, Kurt thinks that something otherworldly is happening, and Wolverine mentions that they saw Jean. Anyway, they decide to go to the airport where Sean is about to land. Except, yeah. Wolverine and Nightcrawler are just waiting for him. And meanwhile, yeah, so remember the Blackbird, the one I forgot? Yeah. Our mysterious Omega mutant seems to send the Blackbird hurtling at the plane where Sean is. So Sean tries to use his powers to save everyone on board. And fails. Yeah. So if the X-Men situation wasn't bad, their plane was used to crash and kill everyone on the passenger plane. Yeah, and they are dead. There's no mysterious retconning or anything that Nightcrawler managed to save everyone. No, they're dead. Meanwhile, we go into another backup. This one of Darwin. Darwin's a guy who can essentially sort of evolve to adapt to any situation. He did not have a good life, and we're not moving past that. And we're going to move past that. He's very smart. And we're just gonna anyway, we find out that someone has come for Darwin. I sort of sped that up, but it's not he. A strange lady came to save his life. Meanwhile, over in issue 3, Logan talks to Beast about the airport situation, and now Beast actually on hearing it listens to Wolverine listened to Wolverine and decides, oh right, the situation is very bad now, isn't it? After all, if the X-Men's Blackbird blew up, oh yeah, the X-Men are going to be in real trouble now. Meanwhile, before Beast and Emma decide to get a handle on things, Beast gets one last thing to Logan. Whatever you do, get the information that Sean had. It was worth his life. Wolverine doesn't like it, but hey, the situation is what it is. We've cut back to Scott and Rachel, who thinks that whatever he did to her was wearing off, except he somehow shows up like a freaking I don't even know what to describe him as, and just like, oh yes, it's wearing off, that's what's happening, because I'm not incompetent at all, right? And she's just a kid. We were all kids once. Yeah, so they're doing something here, and I really do not like Emma's pigtail look. Why did they go with that? So yeah, the X-Men's private jet was hijacked. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they let the X-Men keep their private jet, which is a choice. I thought you people were, mutant powered. Who's gonna be able to steal your jet right under your noses? That's what we've been trying to find out until you people decided to invade us. I'm here on behalf of one, so I'd back that off a little. So we're being treated as terrorists now, is that it? We've got no rights? Your private jet just come, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we're gonna just... Meanwhile, there's a lot of meanwhiling in this book, I'm sorry. So Alex sees another ghost, this time of his dad talking to Professor Xavier, where it's revealed that Professor Xavier seemed to have known who Corsair was and not tell Scott or Alex. Yeah, we see that all the X-Men seem to be suffering from some sort of ghost, as Iceman is attacked by pterodactyls in the Savage Land. Peter is attacked by the KGB. And we cut back to Rachel being used by this. Meanwhile, the wonderful military, who are totally doing such a bang-up job, show up and just go like, I don't need to get anywhere, I am looking at the perps right now. And they keep fighting amongst themselves until Kitty, who continues to be the smartest person in the room, the local authorities probably didn't get you of this report I filed about the Blackbird being missing yet. Report? What report? Filed it yesterday morning as soon as we realized the plane was gone, all in accordance with federal law. Yeah. Kitty had shown the brilliance of actually filing paperwork once he realized that the Blackbird had went missing, realizing that the guy who took out Scott and Rachel was probably the one behind it. And considering the situation they are in right now, reporting it missing seemed like the smartest move. Emma notes that she's on edge, but not just because of the situation, it's because something's like creeping in the corners of her thoughts. Someone's been digging around her mind for the past hour, and she thinks it's Rachel. They go looking for... Anyway, Wolverine and Kurt are looking for Sean's body. Logan says he's going to distract the soldiers so that Kurt can actually find what they came here for. Anyway, he continues his torture. We see our Omega mutant continue to torture Rachel. Just like, wow. Oof. But they do manage to find Scott, whatever Sean was going to get them. Scott praises Rachel for trying to actually fight against the guy, and is trying to sort of lift her spirits, and she realized what exactly the guy was trying to do. He used her powers to try to look for something, find about Professor X, and she discovers that he's got a mental link to the professor, a very old one, and he knew the professor and trained with him. So Logan brings the equipment over to Beast, who see what she recorded, to find out if they, find out whatever information Sean had for them. We see where that tape left off. What a total and utter bastard Charles Xavier really is. He came to me for help to save his X-Men when they went missing. I gave him my own children. He got them all killed. And we cut to one of those children, a girl named Sway. Also lost her parents. Who Sway has the power to stop or manipulate time. And she used those powers to instinctively protect herself, but she was unable to protect her parents. After the police let her go, she's out on the streets again, and eventually sees ghosts of the past, very similar to what the X-Men have been experiencing this entire time. She uses her abilities to track down the killers, and sends the police after them. But when she realized that the killers would not go down too easily, she uses her powers to slow them in time. Anyway, the detective from earlier who helped her out is actually a nice guy who isn't a mutant-hating asshole like everyone else we've been seeing in this book. And he puts her into touch with Dr. Moira McTaggart, revealing that she's been someone who's been working with these kids. And we finally see on cover 4, all 4 of them, Petra, Sway, Darwin, and our mysterious Omega level mutant. We find it years ago that Charles had come to Moira in the middle of the night. This around the time when his first X-Men team went missing while they were dealing with Krakoa. Charles is freaking out. His link with Jean cut out, and he needs Moira's help to save them. Moira relates this situation in the video, which the other current batch of X-Men are listening to. The heroes are discussing this, but they were kind of worried about what is in this that was worth killing for. We then cut back to the past, so as Charles shows the X-Men, shows Moira what his X-Men have been through. As we see Krakoa taking out the X-Men almost severely. Charles realizes that they're still alive thanks to Cerebro, but Moira asks, what can she possibly do to help? And Charles said he needs her students. We cut back to Scott and Rachel, and Rachel realizes that he must have fallen asleep or something and doesn't fully control his Omega level powers yet, so they try to escape. Scott suddenly realizes that he has been here before, but he's not sure why he couldn't remember that. Rachel points out that he thinks he used to be one of the X-Men, which Scott just grits his teeth to. So Moira explains that the kids that they saw were just kids. That she was trying to help. Meanwhile, she sort of, well, they tried to figure out, what a mutant was and how did their powers work and everything. So Charles had met them and had actually worked on them, gave them sort of tests similar to what the Danger Room did for the X-Men. She notes that Petra, Sway's abilities were not very advanced, probably because she'd just gotten her powers when she came to Dr. Moira McTaggart. But Petra, who had been on the streets for a long time, actually had a lot more control of her abilities. Not that Moira couldn't trip her up anyway. And then, of course, there was Darwin, whose evolutionary abilities were just amazing. As he could be fire, he'd become fireproof. He'd put him in darkness. He'd learn to see in it. He'd put him underwater. He grows functioning gills. And finally, there's Kid Vulcan, aka our Omega level mutant. He's had a rough life, but we don't exactly know what it is yet. He has the ability to manipulate energy, his background, and all he wants to do is use his mutant abilities. I think he's been hurt a lot in his life, Charles. He's got that way about him. His real name is Gabriel. He simply prefers Kid Vulcan or Vulcan. Anyway, Moira continues to berate Xavier in the video, saying that I let him risk these kids' lives. And he said it was up to them. Of course, they are kids with the chance of being X-Men. They wanted, obviously, why would they say no for the chance to step up and use their powers? They weren't aware of the danger. After all, they're saying that it could be dangerous. They wanted to help the X-Men. Yes. Charles Xavier really does put off the, oh yes, you would be helping this foolish old man. You would get this great honor. He's really manipulative when he wants to be, and that's probably the thing that really rankles people. It really shouldn't, because Xavier has always had a manipulative streak around him. I guess it was kind of okay when he was a teacher to his students, but when he goes out of his way to essentially browbeat these kids into a situation. After all, if you say that, oh no, it's dangerous, they're not exactly going to be aware of the danger. But if it is a situation that your trained X-Men team couldn't handle, what do you think these people would be able to do? Anyway, and here's where the bigger issue shows up. Instead of properly training them, he essentially downloads months of training into their mind so that they think they've been in multiple combat situations, team bonding situations, which is like, while only a few hours will pass in the real world, this new team will experience months of intensive training in a danger room created solely by my thoughts. Yeah, this is the extent of his manipulation. Yeah. Of course, he doesn't tell them that he's actually downloading all this information into their brains, which might have actually made the situation a little bit better. Because in this comic, Charles Xavier is as shady as he can possibly be. Moira is kind of pissed at what he's making the kids do, and he just sort of browbeats her to, they won't be children for long, Moira, and this world doesn't want them, and they need to fight for something. That something being this old man's ego. He didn't say that, that's me paraphrasing. Moira says, you sound like Eric now. He said, he isn't wrong about everything. Like, oh my god. You went there? You went and did the comparison to Magneto? Ugh. Yeah. When Professor Xavier asks, tries to tell Moira that there'll be examples to everyone who comes after them, Moira points out, what if they just want to be normal people? They not be examples to other people. Yeah. And so they don't have that luxury. And living in denial won't help them. And yeah, they sort of just get past it. No, before, again, Moira really had any time to do anything. Like, Xavier essentially took her kids away from her, gave them access to McTaggart's jet, and then talked separately with Kid Vulcan for one last thing. But yeah, they're off to some island in the middle of the ocean on a fool's errand. The X-Men don't find out anything more else than that because, well, they got the tape was heavily damaged. What else could he do about it? They're clearly shook by what they found out, as they did not know that Xavier had sent another team before the Claremont era team, let's call them that, to rescue the X-Men. But the question that's on their mind is, why haven't they heard of this team? And as Kurt points out, what happened to them? Rachel and Scott find out that, yeah, Moira ran a facility in the States. Scott's mind is starting to slowly clear as he does remember that Alex had come here to have some tests done on him. But he can't remember it, which Vulcan, yeah, I can call him Vulcan now because, well, it's out in the open. This is where you and I met the first time, before we saved you from that hellish island. You? What the hell are you saying? I'm saying your old mentor, Charles Xavier, didn't want you to know. He'd sacrificed your own long-lost brother to save you. So he messed with your head, big brother, like he's done to so many others so many times. Then you, X-Men, just left me and my friends for dead. And now we go into Kid Vulcan's history. This is one of those things that I'm not 100% sure needed to be a backup here. Especially since we're going to go into more details later on. This kind of blunts the impact. I feel that the backups are not bad, but they really don't need to be there. They're not adding anything. As a matter of fact, they're taking away from what the final reveal is going to be. Anyway, we find out Gabriel's passed a little bit. he had a rough life. He is sort of poked and prodded ever since he was a baby. And yeah, he remembers being a servant, a slave. Some had strange hair. He has no idea what this is, but if you have any idea, if you look at this, you can recognize that they are Shi'ar. And all of a sudden, parts of this might start to fall into place for you. But I'm not going to say anything yet so that we can finally reveal the big twist at the end. Dr. McTaggart tries to sort of counsel Gabriel, as she's been trying to do for all these kids. And it's revealed that Professor Xavier used his powers to sort of recover his memory. But while he's been able to do that, he doesn't let Dr. McTaggart know exactly how much he knows. And he accidentally used his powers to kill someone close to him. And him escaping and living in the sewers of New York City. He's also very intrigued by the videos of the X-Men. And then Professor Xavier also seems to have a very keen interest in Gabriel, and wants him to master his powers really quickly. He even, and again, this is so manipulative. And that's why people really kind of don't like this book as much. Because think about it. Professor Xavier introduces Scott Summers to Gabriel Summers, we can call him that. Not tell either of them that they're related, but he knows that they're related. And it was just yeah, anyway, Moira is not happy that Charles seems to be taking a little bit too much interest in Gabriel, but Charles just is like, fie, woman. He has the potential to be one of the greatest energy manipulators on the planet, but there is something wrong with his age. I think it's not quite okay. Gabriel could become an X-Man. Admittedly, and he's very thrilled by it, but he's like, Moira and the professor can never know about how badly he lost control that day, because he could become an X-Man. Anyway, we cut to issue 5. So in issue 5, we see that the Sentinel officers of 1 have managed to discover Kid Vulcan just sort of hovering over the accident site. They're actually, well, they're not exactly nice to the X-Men. They managed to realize that this is probably the guy who hijacked the Blackbird. Yeah. But as Rachel kind of indicated, he is an idiot who doesn't know that he can be traced with his powers. So a Sentinel is sent off to deal with Gabriel, and it's a guy called Briggs who's kind of it's a guy called Briggs, and the reason I'm mentioning him is he's kind of was part of a series called One, and well, there's a reason why you probably haven't heard much more of him after this, because he does manage to discover Scott and Rachel facing off against Gabriel, where Scott is still in disbelief because he thought that Krakoa let him go so that he'd bring back more mutants, and he's like, huh, the island let you go? You can't be serious, big brother. And Scott is in disbelief because he doesn't think that the professor would mess with his mind like that. And while they're fighting amongst themselves, Gabriel goes off to deal with the Sentinel, which is like, I kind of look at the Sentinels, these giant robots. They're scary, okay? They're scary to people, like, oh no, this giant hulking robot attacking people. It can be very scary. But they're not very practical, are they? Anyway, Gabriel essentially fights the Sentinel, and I don't need to be a mind reader to know exactly what's going to happen next. Well, while they fight, Scott essentially tells Rachel to get the rest of the X-Men before things become even more complicated. And yeah, he kills him. Scott tries to, like, no, you didn't kill that man. You killed that man, that racist man. Okay, I know. Okay, fine. I get he's racist, but still, the idea is like, you killed someone you didn't need to. And yeah, that is the more annoying part. But anyway, Gabriel's kind of pissed because they have not been able to find where Professor Xavier is. But by putting on this little display, Gabriel's now certain that Professor X will find him. Meanwhile, and we do see that as Professor Xavier goes on to pay a tab and apparently can walk now. Emma also notes that he's seen Gabriel's face, but doesn't remember when. Yeah, Kitty again showcasing that she is the most brilliant one in this entire group, decides that, hey, I'll do some research. I'll find out who this guy is. She doesn't find that out exactly, but she managed just to discover the site that Moira McTaggart had. It was a research facility run by her and Carl Lykos. This is also a related thing. Lykos and Charles had done their mutant genome project. Moira worked there occasionally. They note that it's one of the kids that was on Moira's tape, except he isn't dead. Rachel does manage to show up and tells them where they're taking Scott. Moore Island. So we're waiting here for Professor Xavier. They're waiting for Xavier and they're not sure what, like, Cyclops, like, we've been trying to find him for weeks. Don't you think we looked here? And we see a boat, which probably indicates that he's coming on this boat, and we're still holding back on some more reveals. Anyway, he mentions the Irish one. and the fact that he's dead. What did you just say? You killed Sean Cassidy? Don't be an idiot, Scott. You're not gonna hurt me or touch me, so don't waste the effort. I needed to create a spectacle to draw Professor X to me. So, you just kill people? Yeah, it is not great. You claim you were an X-Men, you disgust me. You could never be my brother. Anyway, Professor Xavier is on his way to the scene. But I am. I never knew it either. He showed it to me, the professor. He unlocked it from deep inside my mind, found out who I really was. They named me Gabriel, the people who raised me, but they weren't from Earth. I was their slave. I think they had a lot of slaves. What, you... He would have told me. He probably did, but he only told me right before he sent us to that island. He wanted me to know what was at risk, what I might lose. Dear God, Professor Xavier's just... Okay. Xavier has always been a bit shady. He's not Superman or Captain America. But this story does try its best to paint him as, like, gray as possible. Like, if that's even a word. Because he tells Gabriel that Scott's his brother right as they're about to leave, just to give him extra motivation, I'm assuming. God, this story. Scott doesn't believe it, and, well, he doesn't have to ask it for too long. He doesn't have to worry about anything too long because Professor Xavier has shown up, and he can walk. Now, and Professor Xavier tells, just talking with Gabriel, I did, Gabriel. I came here for you too because you're making a horrible mistake. Wait a minute. You know him? Scott, I know you're struggling with disbelief right now, but you cannot be this slow on the uptake. Scott, this... And, of course, the X-Men show up to help. And Gabriel threatens to kill them. But luckily, Logan, Kurt, Emma, they're all showing up. They're here to fight. And yeah, Gabe just sort of knocks them around. Gabe also wants to use Professor Xavier to show him what he did to them, but he starts telling it out verbally, that Gabriel isn't the liar, I am. But Gabe's like, no, not like this, show them. I wish I could, but Wanda gave me my legs back. There's some language here that might be ableist, so I'm skipping past that. Because, yeah, but anyway, Professor Xavier might have his legs back, but he's not a mutant anymore. We also get another flashback, which I just feel like, okay, you know what, we gotta hit the flashback coda here. So here's one where Moira and Xavier go to recruit Emma, and it doesn't go well. Gabriel was with them, so I'm just gonna run through this. Also, we get to see a lot of Emma in her underwear, so that's nice. Or something. Anyway, yeah, and Gabriel's also with them, so yeah, that's how she knows him. Retcons! Anyway, Professor Xavier arbitrarily decides, no, Moira, you were right. This is very complicated. She wasn't going to come with us. Maybe not ever. Blah, blah, blah. And then you're wiping her mind. Anyway, I should point out one little thing here is Gabriel actually points out, hey, so why not just change her mind? That would be wrong. But messing with her memories isn't? What's the difference? It's complicated. Yeah. Anyway, final issue. Whew. We're almost there, folks. Yeah. So Professor Xavier is, he's human now. Emma checked for that. I'm not sure how she can check for that. Charles Xavier is a Homo sapien now. You don't really need to say that. And then Gabriel, who is just, oh, isn't that just perfect? I'm more powerful than all your X-Men put together now, Professor, and you're just a human. No wonder they couldn't find you. They didn't know what to look for. No, I suppose they didn't. So anyway, he uses Rachel to get them to see what everything happened, what happened on the island. It was bad. Krakoa is just not, Krakoa is terrible. They do not stand a chance here. Yeah, they do manage to rescue Cyclops. Yeah, in the meantime, Professor Xavier and Rachel are talking mentally as he's showing this to the rest of the X-Men. After all, talking isn't a free action. Anyway, Cyclops recognizes the kids from Moira's lab, but not much else. They manage to get Cyclops onto the plane as they decide to go back for the rest of the X-Men. And you find out that Gabriel told Scott that he was also a mutant. I've got another brother. Yeah, I believe the professor and your... So, wait a minute. Alex interrupts them. And he's like, you can't be my brother. There's no way. You can't be a year younger than me. Look at you. You think Scott and I would just forget having a brother our whole lives? I know someone who could make you forget anything he wanted. Professor? You tell me right now. Tell me what you did. My God, the Summers genetics for whining and yelling is... Which is kind of funny because I've seen their dad, Christopher Summers, aka Corsair. He's relatively chill compared to them. So, whatever. Anyway, we get the reveal, which would have been a lot more effective if we didn't see that when we were shown the backstory for Gabriel. He wasn't born on Earth. He was a Shi'ar. He was captured. He was born on the Shi'ar homeworld. See, the thing about this, if you don't know, is that Scott and Alex's parents were kidnapped by the Shi'ar. But the retcon here is their mother was 2 months pregnant. And Corsair really tried his best to save his wife and unborn kid. I also have to say that This was the reason Corsair fought so fiercely. Oh my god, Professor, maybe he wanted to save his wife. You didn't need to add like, oh no, he also had an unborn child. That's why he fought so hard. This is just, yeah, anyway, his wife died and the baby was ripped out of him. But the Shi'ar are an advanced alien race, which means that we can do whatever we want. They have technology that can like put them in slave breeding pens, and essentially that's the issue with Gabriel. He's a child in an adult body. But anyway, he made his way back home and was found by Moira McTaggart. Professor Xavier tries to convince him not to do it, but as Gabriel points out, you know, your manipulative spiel doesn't work without your mental powers. You've just given me someone else to hate. And then, of course, he tells Rachel to show Scott's true memories from Krakoa. And Cyclops, I can't believe you just said that. I know, Scott, but I hope you'll at least understand. I'm not sure what. The reasoning that he tries to give is that Scott was so distraught by everything, and he also, as he was leaving, he saw them get torn to shreds, and they were just killed. And in the meantime, yeah, this also is like very weird about this retcon. So yeah, you killed like the island of Krakoa, killed so Krakoa killed the team because they were mad that one mutant had gotten away. You had 4 new mutants who you could now absorb energy off of, and yet you decided, oh no, he let one guy get away, so I'll kill him. That's the reasoning behind it. Professor Xavier had essentially gotten them all killed. Moira was, of course, very mad. And then Professor Xavier goes on to recruit the Claremont team. I like that he said, I've decided that's something he doesn't need to know, that his brother died saving him. You've decided? Scott doesn't believe it. And Professor Xavier is like, no, it wasn't really sentient. It was just a collection of impulses. This is what it really sounded like. And Gabe's like, God, you're even more devious than I thought. Yeah, right, spare us all. So Gabriel's only question is, how did he not die when Krakoa killed him? And Rachel answers that, because I've been in your mind long enough. You're not dead because of your friends. As Sway died, she used her abilities to slow time around them. Petra used her powers to make the ground swallow them. And Darwin used his powers to become energy and bond himself with Gabriel to keep them both alive. Yeah, and that's why Gabriel has access to both Petra and Sway's powers. Because Darwin absorbed them through Krakoa, now it's all held inside Gabriel. But then Rachel decides to wake Darwin up, essentially splitting him from Gabriel. The X-Men decide to take their chances to bring him down. Gabriel's like, stop me from what? Opening your eyes? They get the X-Men get a few good hits in, but eventually he just sort of blasts them all away and flies into space. And we'll get into what happens to Gabriel after this later, once the story's done. Scott is very pissed, and probably would have taken it out on Professor Xavier right then, except Beast points out that Darwin is alive. And Darwin has managed to sort of reconstitute himself. And the fact that the decimation event had released a lot of energy which powered Gabriel, because Gabriel was never this strong initially. He became an Omega level mutant later on, thanks to Wanda releasing all that energy. Darwin also is probably exposed to that same energy, and probably he's alive. So anyway, we cut to the funeral for not only Sean, but also for Sway and Petra. We see his daughter, Siren, as well as we see Polaris and Quicksilver in the back. Everyone's here mourning Sean and the rest of them. Professor Xavier decides to try to talk to Scott, but Scott sort of just stops him and says, I know why you did it. Part of me understands why you did it, but this doesn't change what happened, so you have to leave. You're not welcome at the Institute anymore. Professor Xavier's like, this is my home, my life, I'm not going to. And Scott's like, no, you are. I run the Institute now, not you. You're not even a mutant anymore, Charles. You don't belong here. And meanwhile, we see deep in space, Gabriel's thinking of what the images he was shown. His dad seeing his mom get murdered, and of course, the man who did it. Okay, so that was X-Men Deadly Genesis. A retcon fest that, does not do its best to portray Professor Xavier in the best light, does it? So what happened after this? Well, Gabriel would end up in Shi'ar space and would even become Emperor. He would kill Dakin, but he would also kill his dad. And then during the whole War of Kings event, he would fight Black Bolt and the both of them would die. Black Bolt would come back fairly quickly because, of course, this is the Marvel Universe and comic books, death in the big two doesn't generally mean anything. But Gabriel would come back during the Krakoa era. He seemingly seemed to be a lot more mentally stable. We also saw Sway and Petra back, but then it was revealed to all be a lie. Sway and Petra never came back to life. Gabriel had been sort of reconstituted, not on Krakoa, but by some people in space, by Abigail Brand. Once his original personality came back, he tried to take over the Shi'ar again, but then, Storm kicked his ass. He died again. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure if he's dead or alive right now. I think he might still be dead, but I might be misremembering. Anyway, Gabriel is very reminiscent of another character of the time, Superboy Prime, which is why I started giving him a whiny voice at the end, very similar to what Linkara did for Superboy Prime in his Atop the Fourth Wall reviews. But Gabriel's a bit more sympathetic. I think because he was a child who went through slavery and was just thrown into situations he didn't understand. But the real issue here is he then starts to kill people randomly. He actually has an excuse because essentially if he's a baby, he hasn't developed the empathy required that would, make him go, okay, I shouldn't kill people. Killing people is wrong. That sounds very obvious, but we saw him kill over 100 people in this story. As for the retcons, Professor Xavier would keep his legs and get his powers back eventually, and would die in Avengers vs. X-Men, which this story really kicked off a lot of things. Like, not only the entire thing in space that would end with War of Kings, but it also kicked off, like, Professor Xavier's being such a bastard sort of made Scott doubt his influence, and ended up with everything else around him, led to him being more, what's the word I'm looking for? Excessive? A little bit more impulsive, a little bit more willing to authoritative, to be a little bit more authoritative, and yeah. Eventually leading to Avengers vs. X-Men, and yeah, this is a very interesting situation. The thing is, the story is very well written. It's Ed Brubaker doing his best. Trevor Hairsine, who you may know from his work on Deceased, is the guy behind the art, and he's fantastic as well. But the thing that really bothers me about Deadly Genesis is that it almost feels like it has it out for Professor Xavier. Like, they have to show you in the beginning that Professor Xavier is such a good guy. He saved Nightcrawler from getting killed by a mob, which is a necessary thing. They had to show that because Professor Xavier has done shady shit before. You can't sort of hand wave that away. But yeah, this is a very unique piece of X-Men history, and it actually led to huge impacts down the line, which, yeah, this story is honestly worth checking out at least once. I'm kind of feel bad that Sway and Petra didn't come back in the Krakoa era, because when I read that story, I was like, you're bringing them back, you're correcting some wrongs. No, they never came back. Well, Professor Xavier is a bastard, we know that. Gabriel Summers is an overpowered character, and we've solved the mystery of the third Summers brother, which was a thing. And yeah, that's kind of it. So I'm just rambling at this point. So I'm gonna end this live stream. Apologies, like, there's a reason why I don't do these too often. You can see my very stilted delivery indicates I'm not very good at sort of like just revealing everything as it's going on, if I'm not as well versed in the story, which I do like the story. I've read it a lot, but I feel like Deadly Genesis, it may have laid it on a bit too thick. That's all I'll say. So yeah, this month I'll have another video for you, a very unique style of video, which is why I kind of wanted to do this. I wasn't going to do a comic book story exactly. It's a new sort of thing which I'm going to have to do a lot of research on. So yeah, see you next time, and good evening, good night, good morning, as it is for me right now, and good afternoon. It's